It was supposed to be just another perfect evening. I remember fussing over every tiny detail, wanting this small gathering at our house to be memorable. My best friend Emma was the first to arrive, flashing that bright smile of hers, the same one that always seemed to light up any room. We'd been inseparable since high school, sharing secrets, heartaches, dreams, so it felt only natural she'd be by my side that night, helping me greet guests and keep the laughter flowing. My husband Daniel was bustling around too, carrying trays, topping off drinks, doing all the things a doting partner does. Looking back now, it's almost chilling how normal everything felt. The living room was alive with chatter and soft music. Glasses clinked, someone was telling a joke, and I was right in the middle of it, feeling proud of the life we had built. It wasn't long before Emma suggested we all gather in the main area. She said she had a little surprise. Of course, everyone loves surprises at parties, so people laughed and shuffled closer, curiosity buzzing in the air. I stood beside her, completely unsuspecting, already trying to guess what prank or fun announcement she'd come up with. Maybe she was engaged. Maybe she'd landed her dream job. A million innocent thoughts raced through my mind. Then she took a deep breath, placed her hand dramatically on her stomach, and smiled wider than I'd ever seen. Her voice trembled, not with nerves, but with some sort of twisted excitement as she announced, "I'm pregnant." Instantly, the room erupted in cheers and gasps. People clapped and started congratulating her. Even I let out a little squeal, instinctively hugging her, my heart racing with joy for my best friend, until I felt something wasn't quite right. She hugged me back, almost stiff, and then pulled away to lock eyes with Daniel. That look between them, that second of electric silence, it was enough to make my stomach tighten. She cleared her throat again, her hand still resting on her barely noticeable baby bump, and said words that I will never, ever forget. "And the father, well, he's right here among us." A few people laughed awkwardly, assuming it was part of a joke. I managed a confused smile, glancing around, until she looked directly at Daniel. My entire body went cold. It was like all the blood drained from my head. My husband's face was pale, his mouth slightly open, eyes wide with horror caught. Completely, undeniably caught. A heavy silence swept through the room. Emma repeated herself, almost savoring it this time. "It's Daniel, he's the father." The words seemed to echo off the walls, bouncing back to hit me again and again. My hands were trembling, my throat went dry, and my vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. I wanted to scream at her, at him, at everyone who was suddenly staring at me with pity. Instead, I just stood there, frozen, as my world disintegrated right there in front of our friends and family. No one quite knew what to say. A few people awkwardly shuffled out of the room, giving us space. Others stood rooted, mouths agape. Emma looked oddly satisfied, almost triumphant, as though she had been waiting for this moment, rehearsing it, eager to finally get it off her chest no matter how many hearts it broke. Daniel tried to reach for me, stammering something unintelligible, but I pulled back so sharply you'd think his touch would burn me. In that instant, everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my best friend, my entire life, was shattered. And all I could do was stand there, clutching my glass so hard I thought it might break, struggling to keep from collapsing under the weight of betrayal. I don't think there's any way to truly prepare yourself for the moment when your entire reality is ripped out from under you. After Emma's announcement, time seemed to slow down, almost mocking me. I could hear the faint sound of someone whispering, the clink of ice settling in a glass, and the pounding of my own heart, loud and frantic in my ears. Meanwhile, Daniel just stood there, pale and rigid, as if he might be more terrified of my reaction than of what he'd actually done. His eyes darted around, refusing to meet mine, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for words he didn't have the courage to say. Emma seemed almost serene by comparison. It was disturbing how calmly she smoothed her dress over her tiny bump, as if she was already settling into her new role. She gave me this measured look, a mix of pity and smugness, and for a fleeting moment I wondered if she had done this to hurt me on purpose, or if she genuinely thought she was stepping into some happy new chapter of her life. That ambiguity only deepened the knife twisting in my chest. Then came the attempts at explanation, if you could even call them that. Daniel finally took a step toward me, his voice cracking. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. Like what? Like being exposed at a party. Like creating a child with my best friend behind my back. My hands curled into fists at my sides, nails digging into my palms. Every muscle in my body tensed, fighting the urge to completely lose control right there in front of everyone. Emma spoke next, her voice annoyingly soft, almost gentle. We didn't want you to find out this way. It was never our plan. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it. So what was their plan? Lie forever? Raise a child together in secret while I continued to play the oblivious wife? The betrayal sat heavy on my tongue, bitter and metallic. I couldn't trust myself to speak just yet, because I wasn't sure if the words would come out as tears or as a scream. For a brief, cruel moment, I found myself scanning Daniel's face for some sign of remorse, anything to prove that he was still the man I thought I married. But what I saw was only fear and pathetic regret for getting caught. Not the kind that comes from breaking my heart, but the kind that trembles at the personal consequences. That's when I realized this wasn't just a mistake or a lapse in judgment. This was a choice, multiple choices made over and over again, to betray me with someone I loved like a sister. When I finally found my voice, it sounded foreign to my own ears. It was eerily calm, stripped of all the warmth I once reserved for them. How long? I managed to choke out. Emma and Daniel exchanged a loaded glance, a silent conversation passing between them that made me want to retch. A few months, Daniel admitted, eyes finally meeting mine with a hollow kind of honesty. Emma nodded slightly, as if confirming a business transaction. That was the moment something inside me broke completely. Looking at them, standing side by side, I felt the vastness of the betrayal more keenly than ever. These were the two people I trusted most in the world, and together they had dismantled my life without hesitation. The sting of humiliation only added to the devastation knowing our friends and family had witnessed my destruction. Their sympathetic eyes and awkward retreats carving deeper wounds into my pride. I took a breath so deep it hurt, trying to keep from collapsing under the weight of it all. Then I stepped back, putting as much distance between myself and them as the room would allow. That was the only thing I could control in that moment. My space, my dignity, and the first steps away from the life I thought I had. The days that followed felt like I was living underwater, everything muted and heavy, my own body foreign to me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, Daniel and Emma, standing there with that shared secret, tearing my world apart without so much as flinching. It's strange how your mind does that, playing the worst parts over and over, like it's trying to make sure you don't forget exactly how deep the wound goes. I wandered through our house in a daze, touching the couch where we'd snuggled on movie nights, the kitchen table where we'd laughed over burnt pancakes, the bed we once shared, now feeling like a grave. Every inch of my home seemed soaked in memories that no longer belonged to me. Even the smallest things, a coffee mug he'd used that morning, his jacket thrown over a chair, felt like cruel reminders that everything I believed about my marriage was a lie. There was an even sharper pain that came from thinking about Emma. She wasn't just some stranger who betrayed me. She was my best friend. The person I called at midnight when I was scared or excited. The one who knew all my embarrassing stories. Who stood beside me at my wedding, promising to always be there. I trusted her with my heart in ways I didn't even trust Daniel. And yet she had somehow decided that what I had wasn't sacred, that I didn't deserve loyalty, that her wants were more important than my entire life. It was hard to sort through the tangle of emotions that followed. Anger, of course, burned hottest, igniting in unpredictable flashes, like when I found one of her earrings under my bathroom sink and nearly smashed the mirror in fury. But under the anger was a deep, nauseating sorrow. I grieved them both. It felt like a death, losing two of the people I loved most at the same time, and knowing they were still alive out there, probably together, only twisted the knife deeper. Then there was the humiliation, that raw, stinging shame of being blindsided so publicly. Everywhere I went, I wondered if people were whispering about me, pitying me, replaying the party in hushed tones. I hated that. I hated that I had become a story for other people to tell, that my deepest heartbreak might be someone else's entertainment or gossip. Nights were the worst. Alone in the dark, my mind became a cruel storyteller, replaying moments with Daniel and Emma that I used to treasure, now corrupted. I remembered Emma helping me pick out a dress for an anniversary dinner. Was she already sleeping with him then? I remembered Daniel brushing my hair off my forehead and telling me he loved me. Was that before or after he promised himself to her? The uncertainty was its own special kind of torture. But somehow, through all of that wreckage, a small, defiant part of me started to fight back. I began to realize that my pain was proof of how deeply I could love, how loyal and genuine I had been. Their betrayal said everything about them and nothing about my worth. That truth was hard, one clawed out of sleepless nights and tear-stained pillows, but it was real. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror one morning, eyes puffy, hair a mess, I looked at myself and whispered, almost like a vow, "This will not be the end of me." Eventually the numbness gave way to a simmering need for answers. I couldn't just keep floating through the days, haunted by what-ifs and half-formed nightmares. I needed to hear it from them, to stand there and look both of them in the eye, and demand the truth that had been hidden from me for so long. It wasn't about saving anything. Some desperate part of me might have wanted to cling to that illusion at first, but deep down, I knew it was about reclaiming my power, about proving to myself that I wouldn't shrink away from the people who shattered me. So I called them. Not together, no, I needed this to be my ground, my timing, my terms. First, I told Daniel to come by the house. Watching him pull into the driveway was surreal. Everything looked so normal on the outside. He walked in with this cautious, guilty look on his face, eyes darting everywhere but me, like he was hoping to find some escape route. I didn't offer any small talk, didn't ask if he wanted coffee. I just stood there, arms crossed, the weight of all my hurt pressing down on my shoulders. When he finally met my gaze, I asked him, straight out, how long it had been going on, what she meant to him, and how he could possibly stand there all these months lying to my face. His voice was low, cracking, stumbling over excuses that made my skin crawl. It just happened, he kept saying, like it was some force of nature neither of them could control. But affairs don't just happen. Lies don't just happen. It takes decision after decision to betray someone who trusts you completely. The worst part was how small he seemed. This was the man I had built my future with, who once promised to protect my heart above all else, now reduced to pathetic half-confessions and cowardly sighs. There was no grand apology, no deep remorse that could even start to heal the devastation. Just a hollow man too wrapped up in his own guilt to truly see the wreckage he'd caused. Later I met Emma at her apartment. That was somehow even harder. My heart pounded in my chest as I knocked on her door, part of me irrationally hoping she'd open it and laugh, that this had all been some twisted misunderstanding. But she didn't. She stood there in leggings and a loose top that couldn't quite hide the swell of her stomach, their child, and gave me this guarded look that shattered the last fragments of my hope. Sitting across from her on that worn couch, I let it all out. I told her how much I loved her, how she was my sister in every way that counted, how her betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd ever known. Her eyes filled with tears, but I couldn't tell if they were for me or for herself. She tried to explain that she didn't mean to fall for him, that it was complicated, that she'd been lonely. But none of that mattered. Love isn't supposed to come at the cost of someone else's soul. I told her that. I told her I would have given her anything, my time, my money, my last ounce of energy. But she took from me the one thing that could never be replaced: trust. By the time I walked out of her apartment, I felt strangely lighter. Not healed, not yet, but as if I'd pulled a rotten thorn out of my chest. Confronting them didn't erase the pain, but it made me realize that their choices were never a reflection of my worth. They were only proof of who they truly were, and that truth, painful as it was, would be the foundation I'd use to start building myself back up. After confronting them, after peeling back every ugly layer of their deception, there came this haunting stillness. It was almost worse than the chaos that had come before. There were no more outbursts, no more desperate explanations, no more pitiful excuses. Just silence, and in that silence, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. I could keep trying to make sense of a love that was already dead, keep clutching the ashes of a friendship that had betrayed me, or I could choose myself. In the beginning, that choice didn't feel brave or triumphant. It felt like dragging myself across broken glass. I remember standing in the bedroom I once shared with Daniel, staring at our wedding photo on the dresser. We looked so happy, so certain of each other. I picked it up, tracing our smiling faces with my thumb, and then, almost without thinking, I dropped it face down into a box. That simple act was harder than I expected. It was the start of dismantling a life I thought was forever. The days that followed were full of quiet, painful decisions. I called a lawyer. I began sorting through drawers, dividing what was mine and what was his. Packing up his things felt like gutting the house room by room. I'd fold a shirt, set aside a pair of shoes, and with each item a memory would surface: a Sunday morning dance in the kitchen, a goofy grin after he'd tried to surprise me with burnt toast, soft way he used to say my name. It was agony to see how love could live inside all those little moments, only to be completely betrayed by choices that shattered everything. Letting go of Emma was its own special torment. I had to delete her contact from my phone, erase the endless threads of our texts, the inside jokes, the midnight confessions. For weeks, I'd pick up my phone out of habit, wanting to tell her something trivial, a show recommendation, a random memory, only to remember with a hollow ache that she was the last person I could trust now. The grief was enormous. It wasn't just losing a friend. It was losing the person who knew my heart almost better than I did. But with every boundary I set, I felt a tiny spark inside me flicker back to life. I started taking long walks alone, breathing deeply in ways I hadn't for months. I cooked meals just for myself, not out of obligation, but out of a kind of tender care I'd forgotten how to give. I sat on the porch in the evenings with a book, letting the sunlight warm my skin, reminding myself that there was still so much beauty left in the world that had nothing to do with them. Friends and family stepped in like gentle lifeboats, sending texts to check on me, showing up with wine and stupid movies that made me laugh until my sides hurt. Their presence reminded me that love didn't begin and end with Daniel or Emma. There was a whole world of people who cherished me simply because of who I was, not for what I could give or how I could be used. Little by little, I began to feel proud of the woman staring back at me in the mirror. She was battered and bruised, sure, but she was standing. She was learning to value her own peace above anyone else's comfort, to demand loyalty, not just hope for it, to trust herself again, to trust that even after being torn apart, she could rebuild. And in choosing myself fully, without apology, I finally began to heal. It's funny how healing doesn't come with some grand epiphany or triumphant finish line. It's a slow, uneven thing, a collection of tiny moments that start to stitch your heart back together almost without you realizing it. At first, it felt impossible. I was certain I'd always carry the weight of what they did like a stone lodged permanently in my chest. But over time, the weight shifted. It didn't vanish, not entirely, but it grew lighter, more manageable, until one morning I woke up and realized I could breathe without that crushing tightness. Part of it came from learning to be gentle with myself. For so long I'd blamed myself, replaying every conversation and interaction, wondering if I had missed warning signs, if I had been too trusting, too naive, too easy to betray. Those thoughts haunted me in the beginning, whispering in the quiet hours of the night. But slowly, through long talks with friends who refused to let me drown in my own guilt, and after pouring my soul out in therapy sessions that left me both exhausted and strangely relieved, I began to see the truth. Their choices were never about me. Their betrayal was born from their own weaknesses, their own selfish desires. And I was done carrying shame that didn't belong to me. So I started building a new life, piece by fragile piece. I took a solo trip to a little coastal town, something I would have been too afraid to do before. I spent hours wandering along the shore, feeling the icy water rush over my feet, marveling at how steady the ocean seemed despite its constant turmoil. I filled my tiny rented cottage with fresh flowers, lit candles at night just for myself, and allowed the quiet to soothe me instead of scare me. Somewhere in those solitary moments, I began to trust my own company, to savor it even. Back home, I signed up for a pottery class, something random and messy, that forced me to get out of my head and into my hands. I made lopsided bowls and mugs that couldn't hold more than a sip of coffee, but they made me laugh, made me feel creative and alive in a way I hadn't felt for years. I started going to the farmer's market on Saturdays, chatting with vendors, buying bread still warm from the oven, and letting those small rituals become the scaffolding of a life that was entirely my own. Most importantly, I discovered a version of myself who was stronger than I ever thought possible. Someone who could sit alone in a cafe without feeling self-conscious, who could listen to love songs on the radio without bitterness, who could hear gossip about Emma and Daniel, because of course their scandal didn't stay quiet forever, and simply shrug, no longer letting their story define mine. There were still hard days. Some nights I'd lie awake, the old ache returning like a phantom pain, reminding me of all I'd lost. But even then, I held on to the quiet assurance that I had survived it, that I had taken the ashes of betrayal and used them to fertilize a future that was richer, fuller, and far more authentic than the life I'd clung to before. One evening I found myself watching the sunset from my porch, a glass of wine in hand, and felt a deep, surprising gratitude. Not for the hurt, I would never thank them for the pain they caused, but for the way it forced me to uncover parts of myself I might never have found otherwise. The fierce, unapologetic parts, the resilient, tender parts. The woman who knows now, without question, that she will never again settle for anything less than the love and loyalty she truly deserves.